I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound impossible to 99% of the people listening to me right now. But the math I'm going to show you over the next few minutes is so brutally simple that you're going to wonder why no one has ever taught you this before. A janitor who earns $1,300 a month can retire as a millionaire. I'm not talking about winning the lottery. I'm not talking about investing in crypto and praying. I'm not talking about becoming an entrepreneur or influencer. I'm talking about a mathematical formula so powerful that Albert Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world, and most people completely ignore it because it seems too simple to work. I spent 45 years studying how fortunes are built and destroyed. I managed $160 billion through crises that devastated markets. And I can guarantee you one thing. The difference between those who die poor and those who die a millionaire has nothing to do with how much you earn. It has everything to do with what you do with what you earn. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, subscribe now, because what I'm going to share over the next few weeks could be the difference between working until you die or retiring with the dignity and financial freedom your parents never had. Let me show you exactly how a $1,300 salary turns into $1,400,000. The average person making $1,300 a month looks at that number and thinks they can barely pay the bills, let alone build wealth. This thought is the first mental trap that keeps you poor forever. The problem is not the low salary. The problem is that no one ever taught you the difference between income and wealth. Income is what goes into your account every month. Wealth is what you can make this money multiply over decades without having to work. Most people are obsessed with increasing their income, but completely ignore building wealth. They spend 30 years chasing raises of $200 or $300 a month, but they never stop for 5 minutes to understand how compound interest can turn $100 a month into $500,000. I'll give you the exact numbers, and you'll see how this works in practice. If a person who earns $1,300 a month can only save $200 a month, which is 15.4% of income, and invests that in an index fund that follows the S&P 500, which has historically returned 10% a year on average over the last 90 years. In 40 years, that person will have $1,120,000. Does 40 years seem like a long time? Let me rephrase. If you are 25 today and start doing this, by 65, you are a millionaire. Most 25-year-olds aren't thinking about retirement. They're thinking about financing a $30,000 new car that will be worth $5,000 in 10 years. This single choice, financing the car instead of investing $200 a month, literally costs $1 million in future wealth. But here's where it gets even more powerful. If that same person manages to increase the savings rate to $300 per month, which is 23% of the income of $1,300, the result in 40 years is not $1,120,000. It is $1,680,000. An extra $100 a month generated an additional $560,000. This is the power of compound interest that Einstein revered. Money does not grow linearly, it grows exponentially. In the first 10 years, you will look at your account and only see about $61,000 and think it's not working. But from year 10 to year 20, you don't add $60,000 more, you add $156,000. From the year 20 to the 30, you add $390,000. From year 30 to 40, you add $870,000. Growth has accelerated violently in the last 2 decades because you are no longer investing your money. You are investing the interest on the interest on the interest. And I want to know from you, where are you watching this video from? Leave a comment telling me your city and country, because I want to understand how many people around the world are realizing that building wealth doesn't depend on where you were born or how much you earn. It just depends on you understanding this math and having the discipline to apply it for decades. Now, let me tell you two real stories that prove exactly what I'm saying. Because theory is beautiful, but the truth lies in the real lives of people who applied or ignored these principles. The first story is of a man named Ronald Read, who died in 2014 at the age of 92 in the small town of Brattleboro in Vermont. Ronald worked his life. He worked as a gas station cleaner and then as a department store janitor. No one in town knew, but when he died, he left $8 million as an inheritance. $8 million. A cleaner. As he saved meticulously, bought shares of solid companies that paid dividends, reinvested those dividends, and never sold. He lived in a modest house, drove an old car, and chopped wood to keep warm in the winter. People saw him as poor. He died one of the richest men in that city. Ronald never made more than $1,500 a month in his life, but he understood something that executives earning $200,000 a year don't understand. Wealth is not built with high income. It is built with a high savings rate and time. Meanwhile, the second story is about an executive I met in the 2000s. I'll call him Michael because he's still alive, and I don't want to embarrass him publicly. Michael earned $450,000 a year working at a large technology company in San Francisco. $450,000. 346 times more than the salary of a cleaner earning $1,300 a month. Michael lived in a $2,200,000 house with a $1,800,000 mortgage, drove a $120,000 Tesla Model S financed, sent his 2 children to private school, which cost $60,000 a year, and spent about $10,000 a month on restaurants, travel, and entertainment. When his company took layoffs in 2009 during the crisis, Michael discovered he had exactly $83,000 in savings and investments. Less than Ronald Read probably was at 40. Michael had to sell his house in a hurry. He lost $300,000 in the process because the real estate market had collapsed, and at the age of 52, he had to start his financial life over practically from scratch. The difference between these two stories was not income. Michael probably earned $20 million throughout his career, while Ronald earned perhaps $500,000 throughout his life. The difference was that Ronald understood that every dollar you don't spend today could multiply by 10 or 20 in the next 30 years, while Michael believed that his high income would last forever, and that he could spend now and save later. The after never came. This is the brutal truth that no one wants to hear. It doesn't matter how much you earn if your savings rate is 0. A cleaner saving 20% builds more wealth than a doctor spending 100%. Mathematics doesn't care about your title on your business card. It only cares about how much you feed the compound interest machine every month for decades. Now let me show you the exact framework that allows anyone, regardless of income, to build real and lasting wealth. At Bridgewater, we have developed something we call the all-weather portfolio, which is a portfolio designed to work in any economic environment. But the most fundamental principle we learn from managing wealth isn't about asset allocation, it's about behavior. The low-salary wealth-building framework has 5 unbreakable pillars, and if you follow all 5 religiously for decades, it's mathematically impossible not to become a millionaire. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying it's simple, and those two things are completely different. The first critical action is to establish what I call a sacred savings rate, and this rate needs to be defined as a percentage of income, never as an absolute value. Why? Because when you set $200 a month as your savings goal, what happens when you earn an extra $1,000? You spend the $1,000. But when you set 20% as your sacred rate, automatically every increase in income is accompanied by a proportional increase in savings. The logic behind this is profound. You are training your brain to live on 80% of your income, no matter if it's $1,000 or $10,000. In the book I wrote, Principles, I dedicate an entire chapter to the idea that habits are more powerful than goals. Having a goal of saving $50,000 is useless. Having the habit of saving 20% of everything that comes in is transformative. During the 2008 crisis, we studied the behavior of thousands of individual investors using brokerage data. We discovered something fascinating. Investors who had monthly investment automation continued investing during the crash and bought stocks at incredibly low prices that then appreciated by 300 or 400%. Investors who invested manually based on how they were feeling that month stopped investing when fear peaked, missing the biggest buying opportunity of a generation. The sacred savings rate needs to be automated on the day the salary hits the account. Before you pay any bill, before you buy anything, 20% comes out of your checking account and goes into investments. You learn to live with the 80% that is left. This is counterintuitive because most people pay all their bills first and try to save what's left. What's left? Zero. Always zero. You expand your spending to consume all available income. This is a behavioral law called Parkinson's Law applied to finances. The consequence of not setting this sacred automated rate is that you'll spend 30 years working hard, getting raises, thinking you're getting ahead, and in your 60s, you'll wake up realizing you have exactly the same net worth as you did in your 30s. Almost nothing. I saw this happen to dozens of people who earned excellent salaries but never internalized this principle. The second protective and building action is what I call lifestyle arbitrage, and this is where most low-wage people waste their biggest competitive advantage against high-income people. Let me explain the logic of arbitration. People who earn $1,300 a month and people who earn $13,000 a month have access to the same basic products and services. An iPhone costs $1,200 for both. A reasonable apartment can be rented for $800 or $1,000 in medium-sized cities. Healthy food costs about $400 to $500 a month. Public transportation or a reliable used car costs $200 to $300 a month. The math of surviving with dignity in a developed or developing country is surprisingly similar across income classes. The difference is in incremental luxury. The $13,000 person spends $3,000 on renting a luxury apartment that isn't 3 times better than the $1,000 apartment. It's 10 or 15% better. She spends $1,500 on a luxury car that doesn't get her from A to B any better than a used car, just with more status. Spend $1,000 in restaurants that serve no better food than $500 home-cooked food, just in more elegant settings. Here's the arbitrage. If you earn $1,300 and live on $1,040 while saving $260, you are saving 20%. If someone earns $13,000 and lives on $12,700 while saving $300, they are only saving 2.3%. You're building wealth 8 times faster in relative terms, and in absolute terms, you're only saving $40 less per month. The historical performance of this strategy is clear in the data. The bottom percentile of income who saves 20% ends up with higher net worth than the top percentile who saves 5%, given enough time. Economic mobility studies show that children of families in the bottom income quintile who learn a high savings rate rise to the top quintile in 1 generation, while children of families in the top quintile with a low savings rate descend to the bottom quintiles. The practical instruction is brutal in simplicity. Completely reject financing for any item that depreciates. Car, cell phone, furniture, clothes, electronics. If you don't have the money to buy it in cash, you can't pay for it, period. Financing turns a $1,000 item into a $1,400 or $1,600 item because of interest. And worse, it creates a monthly obligation that destroys your financial flexibility. The common mistake here is thinking that financing small items doesn't matter because it's only $50 or $80 a month. But $50 a month invested at 10% for 40 years is $316,000. You are trading $300,000 of future wealth for a couch that will be in the trash in 10 years. The consequence of not doing this lifestyle arbitrage is that you will work the same number of hours as rich people, earn much less, but still end up with the same ultimate net worth of zero because you spent it all trying to look rich instead of building real wealth. The third action is possibly the most misunderstood and is where most people who start out well destroy everything they have built, developing what I call immunity to lifestyle inflation. And this requires a level of psychological awareness that very few people develop naturally. Here's the devastating pattern I've seen hundreds of times. A person starts out earning $1,300, learns to live on $1,040, saving $260 a month, 20%. 5 years later, he earns $1,800, an increase of $500, 38% more. What happens? In the first week, she thinks she will save the $500 extra dollars. In the second week, she reasons that she deserves a slightly better apartment, raises the rent by $150. In the second month, he buys a slightly less old car. The installment goes up by $80. In the third month, he starts going out to dinner twice a week instead of once, plus $100. In the fourth month, you subscribe to 3 streaming services instead of 1, plus $25. By the fifth month, you are spending the full extra $500 and saving the same $260 as before. The savings rate fell from 20% to 14.4%. 10 years and 3 raises later, she earns $3,000 a month, but only saves $320, a savings rate of 10.6%. At the age of 45, he realizes that although his income has more than doubled, his net worth has grown much less than expected because the savings rate has been eroded by lifestyle inflation. The mathematical logic is simple but brutal. If you start saving 20% with $1,300 and keep 20% with $3,000, you save $600 per month instead of $320. This difference of $280 per month for 20 years at 10% results in $212,000. You literally left $250,000 on the table because you couldn't maintain fixed percentage discipline. At Bridgewater, when we analyzed employee wealth building throughout their careers, we discovered that the only statistically significant predictor of final wealth was not starting salary, not total bonuses received, not investment performance. It was consistency of savings rate throughout the career. People who maintained a 20 to 30% rate, regardless of increases, ended up in the 95th percentile of group wealth. People whose rate fell below 10% after increases ended up in the 20th percentile, even though they earned twice as much. Practical instruction here requires creating a system of protection against yourself. When you receive a raise, before the first higher salary hits the account, you increase the automatic investment transfer proportionately. If you saved $260 out of $1,300 and now earn $1,800, the transfer increases to $360, keeping 20%. You never see that extra money in your checking account, so you never have a chance to rationalize spending it. The fatal mistake that people make is thinking that they are going to mentally control the increased expenses. They won't. Nobody controls. The temptation is too strong, and the rationalizations are endless. You deserve it because you worked hard. You need it because your situation has changed. You can because now you earn more. All of these rationalizations are the path to permanent financial mediocrity. The consequence of not developing this immunity is working for 40 years, receiving dozens of raises, reaching the age of 65, earning 5 or 6 times as much as at 25, and still not having enough wealth to retire because each raise was absorbed by a slightly better lifestyle that added zero lasting happiness, but completely destroyed the acceleration of wealth building. The fourth critical action, and where the math becomes truly magical, is understanding and taking advantage of what I call the low-wage temporal advantage. And this is probably the most powerful advantage you have, but it disappears if you don't use it in the first 10 to 15 years of your working life. Let me show you the specific math that will make you understand why starting early with a little is infinitely more powerful than starting late with a lot. Person A starts investing $200 a month at age 25, does it religiously for 10 years until age 35, then stops completely. He invested a total of $24,000. Person B waits until he's 35, when he's earning more, and can invest $400 a month. Does this for 30 years until he's 65. He invested a total of $144,000, 6 times more capital. At age 65, assuming a 10% annual return, Person A has $760,000. Person B has $730,000. The person who invested 6 times less capital ended up with more money. Why? Because the first years have 40 years to compose, while the last years only have 1 or 2. Time is more powerful than amount. This is the temporal advantage. When you are young and earning little, every dollar you invest has 3 or 4 decades to multiply dozens of times through compound interest. When you wait until you have an established career and high salary, each dollar is only a decade or 2 old, maybe 10 or 15 years to compose. Performance is exponentially lower. We study this phenomenon using data from the retirement accounts of millions of Americans. The top 10% of wealth at 65 were not the top 10% of earners. They were those who started investing before the age of 30, even with small amounts. The median start of investment for the top 10% was 27 years. Of the bottom 10%, it was 43 years old. 16 years of difference at the beginning created a difference of millions of dollars in the end, even with similar salaries. The practical implementation is to start with whatever value is possible, even if it seems ridiculously small. $50 a month seems insignificant, and at 25, you think it's better to wait until you earn more to invest amounts that make a difference. But $50 a month from 25 to 65 to 10% turns into $378,000. Waiting 10 years and investing $100 a month from 35 to 65 results in $379,000. Practically the same end result, investing twice as much per month because you lost 10 years of compounding. The common mistake warning here is deadly. People think they will start investing seriously when they earn more. They never really earn more because lifestyle inflation absorbs the increases. Even if they earn more, they have already lost the most valuable years of compounding. I saw this with a colleague who started working at Bridgewater when he was 22. In the first 5 years, earning $60,000 a year, he spent almost everything because he thought that when he became a senior analyst and earned $150,000, then he would start investing heavily. At 35, earning $220,000, he had exactly $82,000 in investments. If you had invested just $10,000 a year from 22 to 27, even stopping afterwards, you would have $380,000 by 35 just from those first $60,000 invested. He lost $300,000 in wealth because he expected to have more to invest. The consequence of not taking advantage of the temporal advantage is that you work from 25 to 45, earning an increasing average salary, but not investing because you are hoping to earn more. Then from 45 to 65, you try to compensate by investing aggressively. And at 65, you realize that you have a third of the wealth you would have if you had just started early with small amounts. The The time lost in the first 20 years of your professional life is irrecoverable, no matter how much you invest later. The fifth building block, and the last one I'll detail, is developing what I call low-cost investing literacy. Because there's no point saving religiously if you destroy your returns by paying ridiculous fees or making stupid investment choices based on emotion or internet tips. Here's the brutal truth about investing that the financial industry hates you to know. 92% of actively managed funds underperform the S&P 500 index over 15-year periods, after accounting for fees. This means that paying a manager to pick stocks for you results in less money in 92%